The anime opens with a young boy asking a quiet yet philosophical question. What does it truly mean to see? He sits in an extravagant room surrounded by his wealthy family and several servants, making it immediately clear that money is not something this household lacks. The boy's name is Kunan, and he was born without sight. Having never experienced colors or shapes, he struggles to understand the world around him. This condition has shaped him into a gloomy, withdrawn child who believes he was dealt a particularly cruel fate. Those around Kunan care for him deeply and do their best to explain what sight is like. Unfortunately, their well-meaning efforts only make things worse. Every explanation reminds Kunan that seeing is something he will never experience. Instead of feeling comforted, he feels excluded, as though everyone else is living in a vibrant painting while he is trapped behind a wall, listening to descriptions of it. Soon after, Kunan's personal servant, Iko, escorts him to his magic lesson. Because of the family's immense wealth, the lesson takes place inside the palace, and the teacher functions more like a private tutor than a standard instructor. Kunan is far from excited. He questions the point of learning magic when he cannot even walk freely without help. In his mind, studying magic without sight feels like trying to draw a masterpiece without ever seeing the canvas. Iko disagrees and reminds him that he was born with a rare water magic crest. Letting such talent go to waste, he argues, would be nothing short of a tragedy. Inside the classroom, Kunan greets his magic teacher, Jenny. She begins with a basic spell, teaching him how to create a small ball of water, roughly the size of an eyeball. That simple spell becomes a turning point of Kunan's life. For the first time, a realization strikes him. If magic can create water, then perhaps magic can create eyes that can see. From that moment on, Kunan takes his training seriously. His personality changes dramatically. Once gloomy and detached, he becomes noticeably more cheerful. Even during breakfast, he begins asking questions about his food, curious about what it looks like. For someone who once ate in complete indifference, this sudden enthusiasm is nothing short of revolutionary. Driven by curiosity, Kunan visits his history teacher and asks to hear the tale of the Holy Knight, Hister Huglia. She recounts the legend of a demon lord who once terrorized a nation and the knight who stood against it. Hister emerged victorious but lost an arm and a leg in the process. According to legend, his descendants are occasionally born missing something, an arm, a leg, or even their eyesight. Kunan is one such descendant, which explains both his blindness and his extraordinary magical potential. Inspired, Kunan throws himself into training. He quickly discovers that talent alone is not enough. While he can create and divide water spheres, doing so drains him rapidly, leaving him completely exhausted. To improve his stamina, he takes up sword training, reasoning that physical strength will support his magical growth. After finishing sword practice, he immediately moves on to magic lessons, leaving Jenny to wonder whether the boy ever plans on resting. The results are astonishing. Kunan soon manages to create 7 water spheres at once, shocking Jenny completely. His rate of growth is far beyond normal, and she begins to quietly question whether she is still qualified to teach him. The story then shifts to Princess Marika, Kunan's fiancée. Her servant informs her that the carriage is ready to depart for her future husband's estate. Marika feels little excitement, fully aware that the engagement is political. She also remembers Kunan as a gloomy and unpleasant boy. However, when she meets him again, she is caught off guard. Kunan is cheerful, energetic, and even playful. He shows her a few magic tricks, quickly winning her over. The two spend time laughing and playing together, and when Marika departs, she genuinely hopes to see him again soon. Motivated by this encounter, Kunan decides to better himself not only as a mage, but also as a future husband. He begins studying proper manners, especially how to behave around women, an endeavor that proves just as challenging as magic training. Meanwhile, Jenny is quietly panicking. Kunan's progress is so rapid that she realizes she may soon have nothing left to teach him. What was meant to be an easy tutoring job to pay the bills has turned into a professional nightmare. Determined not to fall behind, she spent the entire night preparing a new lesson. The next day, Jenny teaches Kunan how to alter the properties of his water magic. She demonstrates by creating 1 warm water sphere and 1 cold one, explaining how to control their qualities. To her shock, Kunan masters the technique on his first attempt, and goes one step further by producing water that tastes like plum. At that point, Jenny begins to suspect she may actually be raising a monster and not the demon lord kind. That night, Kunan lies awake thinking about colors. Because he cannot see them, they remain an unsolved mystery that deeply troubles him. The following morning, he creates another water sphere at breakfast and tests it against a bowl of apples containing different colors. He suddenly stands up in shock. For the first time in his life, he can distinguish between red and green. He cannot see the colors, but his magic allows him to perceive the difference. Iko reports his breakthrough to Kunan's father, who is overjoyed. Kunan's abilities continue to evolve, allowing him to read books by recognizing the ink through magic alone, a truly revolutionary development. However, The story quickly reminds viewers that magic is not without danger. In one unfortunate accident, Kyunan creates a red-tinted water sphere above his head, which bursts and splashes over both him and Iko. To anyone watching, it looks as though Kyunan has been drenched in blood. The sight is so shocking that his mother immediately faints, proving that while magic can work miracles, it can also cause extremely dramatic misunderstandings. The next episode opened with Kyunan's father making what he considered a crucial decision about his youngest son's future. He summoned his eldest child, Ixio Gurion, and informed him that Kyunan would be enrolling in the noble school. Ixio was understandably startled by the announcement. Kyunan was blind, after all, and this was hardly a small matter. As his father spoke, Ixio's thoughts drifted to a memory from their childhood. He remembered inviting Kyunan to play with him, hoping to cheer up his usually gloomy younger brother. Kyunan had hesitated, pointing out, quite reasonably, that he could not see the ground, the field, or, frankly, anything at all. Ixio had enthusiastically assured him that it would still be fun. Unfortunately, reality had been less kind. Before the playtime had even begun, Kyunan had tripped and fallen, leaving Ixio standing there, feeling like the world's most incompetent older brother. Shaking off the memory, Ixio returned to the present and told his father that if Kyunan chose to attend the noble school, he would have his older brother's full support. Not long afterward, Kyunan himself was summoned to his parents' chambers to discuss the matter. As he made his way there, he wondered what could possibly have prompted his father to call for him, something that almost never happened. Just before entering the room, he ran into Ixio and greeted him with unexpected cheer. Ixio was momentarily stunned by his younger brother's carefree demeanor. For most of Kyunan's childhood, gloom had been his default setting, and enthusiasm had been in short supply. Kyunan soon met with his parents, who explained the situation. They clearly hoped he would attend the noble school, but they emphasized that the final decision would be his alone. Members of noble families were generally expected to attend such schools in order to function properly in society. Kyunan, however, was exempt from this obligation due to his blindness. Even so, his father warned him that those without a noble school education were often looked down upon, and that refusing to attend could cause serious difficulties for him later in life. Although the conversation was plainly about school, Kyunan began to suspect that his father had some hidden agenda. He abruptly concluded that the real issue must be his allowance, convinced that his father believed he spent it irresponsibly. This assumption led to a brief and entirely pointless argument. After that detour, Kyunan finally decided that attending the school might actually be a good idea. His father then explained that the school required students to pass 5 examinations in order to graduate. Each successful exam brought them one step closer to becoming a fully functioning member of society. Because Kyunan was blind, the exams would be scheduled at much shorter intervals, allowing him to graduate more quickly than other students. Kyunan's mother was thrilled by the decision and immediately began planning his new wardrobe. Marika was equally delighted when she heard the news and promised to show Kyunan around the school. Kyunan worried that other boys might resent him for being engaged to someone as beautiful as Marika, but she casually dismissed the concern. The day of departure soon arrived, and Kyunan looked as charming as a boy his age possibly could in his new clothes. Before boarding the carriage to school with Ixio, he wrapped its wheels in water magic, ensuring a smooth ride. Ixio was deeply impressed, and Kyunan could even sense when they were nearing the school, thanks to his growing ability to perceive the presence of people nearby. Upon arriving, the first person Kyunan encountered was his fiancée, Princess Marika. She complimented his bow tie, declaring it fabulous. Kyunan, ever flirt, worried aloud that it might look better than Marika herself, a claim she immediately rejected. He jokingly added that if that were true, he would tear the bow tie apart, since nothing in the world deserved to outshine her. Ixio could only cringe in silence, wondering what exactly had happened to his little brother since learning magic. Kyunan then managed to escalate his antics by asking Marika if she could be a boy for the day. To his surprise, she agreed and took on the role of his guide around campus. During their tour, they eventually met the teacher responsible for overseeing Kyunan's education. She led him to an isolated classroom and explained that he would need to pass 5 exams. While there was normally a long gap between each one, Kyunan's exams would be held much closer together, at his father's request. Despite this explanation, Kyunan appeared completely at ease as the first exam began. He even continued chatting with the teacher during it. To her astonishment, every question he attempted was answered correctly, revealing an intellect far beyond what she had expected from an ordinary student. After a long day, Kyunan reunited with Marika, and the two decided to head to the cafeteria for a meal. On the way, they ran into Lyle, Marika's older brother. As a member of the royal family, he intimidated most of the students, and true to form, he attempted to bully Kyunan as well. Ixio stepped forward to intervene, but it quickly became clear that his help was unnecessary. Kyunan calmly uses water magic to soak Lyle's pants, making it look as though he had wet himself. The surrounding students quickly drew their own conclusions. Unable to bear the humiliation, Lyle withdrew. Kyunan and Marika continued on to enjoy their meal together, while Ixio was left with a single overriding thought. He really hoped he would not get dragged into trouble again. The next episode opens with Kyunan cheerfully continuing his meal in the school cafeteria alongside Marika and his elder brother. On the surface, everything appears calm, almost cozy, but despite having handled the earlier confrontation with impressive wit and speed, Kyunan remains visibly unsettled by Prince Lyle's behavior. He admits that he cannot wrap his head around why Prince Lyle would treat his own sister with such open rudeness and outright violence. In response, Marika explains, patiently and with the tired wisdom of someone who has lived it, the less glamorous side of royal life. She tells Kyunan that as a ninth princess, she ranks below Prince Lyle in the royal hierarchy, which already places her at a disadvantage. However, matters become even more complicated due to her engagement to Kyunan. Not only is he a sorcerer, but he also bears a hero scar, an unfortunate combination if one wishes to avoid attention. This engagement, Marika explains, has given her an unintentional and rather dramatic boost in status, despite the fact that she never asked for it. As a result, she has managed to turn her own brother into an enemy, and judging by how royal politics work, he will likely not be the last. She remarks dryly that life as royalty is far from a fairy tale and is certainly not a bed of roses. More like a rose garden with very sharp thorns and no gloves. Marika then makes it clear that she has no interest in climbing the social ladder or chasing prestige. What truly matters to her is Kyunan himself. She says she genuinely likes the person he has become and cannot imagine being with anyone else. This heartfelt confession leaves Kyunan in a dazed state of happiness, as if reality itself has briefly forgotten to function. Without hesitation, he declares that he feels the same way and has no intention of ever choosing anyone else. Once his emotional equilibrium returns, somewhat, Kyunan announces that he wants to repair the bridge he just burned with Prince Lyle. He explains that he believes they simply started off on the wrong foot, and that making enemies on campus, especially royal ones, sounds like a terrible long-term strategy. He proposes apologizing to the prince and clearing the misunderstanding. This idea, however, is met with an immediate and unmistakable chill. Both Marika and his elder brother reject the proposal outright, their expressions making it painfully clear that while Kyunan's intentions may be noble, his optimism is dangerously naive. The following day, Kyunan resumes his sorcerer training under Jeannie's guidance. She instructs him to form a water ball and alter its texture using magic alone. Kyunan accomplishes the task effortlessly, treating the exercise as little more than a warm-up. Jeannie concludes the lesson by advising him to continue gathering sensory impressions from different objects, explaining that doing so will help him manipulate the texture of his water creations with even greater precision. Soon after, the long-awaited day arrives. Kyunan heads to school for the final time, as this marks his graduation exam. At the front gate, he meets Ixio and Marika. After giving Marika a pointed look, Kyunan dramatically expresses how deeply his heart aches at the thought of them parting ways after today. Marika, ever practical, reminds him that they still have the entire evening together. The mere thought of spending time with his future wife instantly sweeps away his gloom, as though it had never existed in the first place. Together, they head into the school. Once inside, Kyunan learns that he will be taking the exam alongside his classmates. For the first time, he finds himself in a room filled with students his own age. Curiosity spreads quickly, and several classmates approach Marika, asking her to introduce them to her fiancé. Kyunan takes the initiative and introduces himself with such refined eloquence that the class briefly wonders whether another royal has secretly enrolled. He remarks that he is relieved to see Marika as friends, admitting he had worried she might be the quiet, lonely type. He also admits, internally, that he had avoided bringing this up before out of fear of sounding rude. Marika takes mild offense and promptly clarifies that she is, in fact, quite popular. She adds that she deliberately kept her friends from approaching Kyunan earlier because she wanted their time together to remain private. Kyunan gratefully agrees, noting that he enjoyed her company more than anything else. Not long after, the exam is about to begin, until Prince Lyle makes his entrance. He will also be taking the final exam, much to everyone's dismay. In a mood as foul as ever, the prince asserts his presence with practiced arrogance, fully aware that no one would dare challenge him. He stirs trouble for no clear reason, emboldened by the silence of those around him. Although Prince Lyle knows exactly what people think of him behind his back, no one ever has the courage to face him directly. That changes abruptly when Kyunan, without warning, grabs Prince Lyle's hand. Before the prince can react, Kyunan begins showering him with unexpected compliments, remarking that from the feel of his hand alone, he can tell he is incredibly strong, and adding, quite sincerely, that if he had eyes, he would surely see straight through Prince Lyle's beautiful face. The sudden flood of praise leaves the prince completely unprepared. His anger evaporates, replaced by visible embarrassment to the astonishment of the entire class. In mere seconds, Kyunan transforms what could have been a disastrous confrontation into something resembling a comedic anime skit. For perhaps the first time, Prince Lyle feels as though someone has truly stood up to him. The exam proceeds, and once it ends, the results are announced immediately. The teacher solemnly states that she will write the names of the students who passed on the board. A heavy silence fills the room. To everyone's shock, she writes no names at all, only a massive flower. After a dramatic pause, she cheerfully announces that everyone has passed. Relief and celebration erupt across the classroom. As evening falls, Kyunan prepares to return to his palace. He bids a bittersweet farewell to his new friends and most painfully to Marika. With hope for the future in his heart, he boards his carriage and leaves the school behind for good. Not long after, Kyunan attends his sorcerer examination under Jeannie's supervision. She challenges him relentlessly, throwing every test she can think of at him, but none are enough to push him to his limits. Kyunan goes even further, transforming one of his water balls into a bird and granting the power of flight. Jeannie watches in disbelief as the water creature flutters through the air. At that moment, she fully realizes that Kyunan has surpassed her ability as a teacher. Later, while sharing snacks, Jeannie finally confesses her thoughts. She admits that she is no longer fit to teach someone as extraordinarily gifted as Kyunan. The revelation hits him hard. He cannot imagine learning magic from anyone else. In a rare burst of emotion, Kyunan insists that she must find a way to continue as his teacher, even offering her more money if motivation is the issue. His agitation causes his magic to surge uncontrollably, and before he realizes it, multiple water animals spring into existence around them. Although Jeannie sympathizes with Kyunan's feelings, witnessing such a display only strengthens her resolve. She calmly explains that the gap between their abilities is simply too great for her to be of any use to him. With that, she resigns from her position and takes her leave. Kyunan is left stunned, struggling to process this sudden change. That evening at dinner, Kyunan reluctantly informs his family of Jeannie's resignation. While he is clearly shaken, his father remains composed. He redirects the discussion toward finding a new sorcerer capable of teaching someone of Kyunan's caliber. The challenge, however, lies in the fact that sorcerers of such skill typically serve royalty directly and rarely leave the palace, as they are considered invaluable assets. Still, Kyunan's father promises to speak with the king and do everything in his power to secure a suitable mentor for his gifted son. The fourth episode opens with Kyunan traveling toward the royal palace in a carriage beside his father. To spare himself from the inevitable aches of a long journey, he is calmly wrapping the carriage wheels in a layer of water magic, smoothing the ride as if the road itself has grown gentle beneath them. He reflects that he has no desire to arrive with a sore back, especially on a day as important as this one. As the carriage rolls forward, Kyunan speaks with his father, still struggling to believe that he is truly headed for the royal palace. The fact that he has been granted permission to study magic under the Grand Sorcerer himself feels unreal to him. He muses that life is unpredictable and that no one can ever know what fate will suddenly place in their path. His father, however, firmly disagrees. He explains that this cannot be dismissed as mere luck. Gaining an audience with the king is rare enough, and being invited to study under the palace's own sorcerers is rarer still. To him, it is obvious that the royal sorcerers have been aware of Kyunan for some time and have taken a keen interest in his abilities. This realization makes Kyunan uneasy, though he quickly brushes the feeling aside. To lighten the mood, he demonstrates the extent of his magic by forming a small cat out of water. The lifelike creature delights his father so much that Kyunan jokingly suggests they should keep a few cats in the palace. Despite his fondness for felines, his father refuses, arguing that cats are too prone to running about, disrupting work, and causing accidents. He also points out that his wife, Tina, prefers dogs. Kyunan counters by suggesting that the cats could stay outside and roam freely in the palace gardens instead. His father considers the idea and bursts into laughter, admitting that it may not be such a bad compromise after all. Before long, they arrive at the palace grounds, where they are greeted by Lady Rayshaw. She is not only a skilled sorcerer, but also the second princess and the elder sister Marika. Her attention is immediately drawn to the cat Kyunan's father is carrying. When he sets it down, Kyunan dispels the magic, and the watery feline dissolves instantly. Lady Rayshaw is deeply impressed, finding Kyunan's level of control and creativity fascinating. Kyunan's father, on the other hand, mourns the loss of the cat he had grown fond of in just a few short moments, despite knowing it had only been an illusion. Lady Rayshaw explains that she has heard much about Kyunan from her younger sister, Marika. At the mention of her name, Kyunan excitedly announces that he has already reserved a beautiful restaurant for the evening and plans to take his fiancée, Marika, out on a special date. His enthusiasm makes Lady Rayshaw blush, charmed by how earnest and adorable he is. Soon, Kyunan's father departs to attend his audience with the king, while Kyunan heads deeper into the palace with Lady Rayshaw to meet the Grand Sorcerer. Along the way, she explains the inner workings of royal succession. While tradition usually favors the firstborn prince, in this kingdom the crown is awarded to the son or daughter who achieves the greatest accomplishments. With 7 princes and 10 princesses, competition for the throne is fierce and constant. Lady Rayshaw reveals that she herself abandoned any claim to the crown in order to pursue magic, a choice that permanently disqualifies her from becoming queen. Midway through their walk, she notices that Cunon is not even using his feet, instead gliding along the floor by skating on magic. Despite her mature composure, her inner child gets the better of her, and she eagerly asks to try it herself. Before indulging the fun, she gives Cunon a grave warning. He must never involve himself with any faction among the palace sorcerers. Though the warning is serious, it comes across lightly, as her attention is clearly focused on the thrill of skating. Together, they glide to the palace halls until they are eventually reprimanded by a knight, who reminds them that as royalty, they should be setting an example rather than breaking the rules. At last, Cunon arrives at the chambers of Lodimon Acthard, the Grand Master of all sorcerers in the royal palace. The Grand Master informs him that he must first pass a test before being accepted as a student. He also explains that Cunon bears a water crest and possesses a 2-star rating. There are 7 crests in total: fire, water, wind, earth, light, darkness, and foul, and each person is born with only one. Every crest is ranked by stars, up to a maximum of 5, with a higher number indicating greater magical potential. Lodimon reveals that he himself holds a 4-star crest, while both Cunon and Lady Rayshaw possess 2-star crests, setting the stage for Cunon's trial within the royal palace. As part of his trial, Cunon is introduced to another sorcerer who also bears the water crest. The sorcerer demonstrates his skill by conjuring a vast number of floating water spheres, filling the space with shimmering orbs. Cunon is visibly impressed, amazed that someone can produce such a large quantity of water at once. The Grand Master then explains Cunon's task. He must use his own magic to draw those water spheres toward himself. Cunon realizes immediately that this will not be easy, as he has never attempted to manipulate water created by another sorcerer. The thought makes him uneasy, but he steels himself and resolves to try regardless. Gathering all his strength, he pulls at the spheres with his magic. Despite his effort, he manages to draw only 2 water balls away from the other sorcerer's control. The attempt leaves Cunon utterly exhausted. He has never encountered water that actively resisted his command, and the strain takes a heavy toll on him. To his surprise, however, the Grand Master is thoroughly pleased. Far from disappointed, he declares Cunon's performance more than satisfactory and awards him a passing score, much to Cunon's astonishment. The Grand Master then asks Cunon to demonstrate what else he can do with his magic. In response, Cunon forms a massive mattress out of water. To everyone's surprise, the Grand Master immediately begins jumping on it with the enthusiasm of a child. Cunon is taken aback, never having expected to see such a carefree side from someone of such high rank within the royal palace. Encouraged, Cunon goes on to demonstrate his ability to shape water into a human figure and make it float. Unfortunately, the illusion drifts to the palace halls, frightening several people in the process. The incident forces both Cunon and the Grand Master to issue apologies for the unintended chaos. As the sun begins to set, Cunon finally reunites with his father, who is preparing to leave the palace after his audience with the king. His father informs him that he has already heard about Cunon's mischievous use of magic and makes it clear that he is not pleased. He sternly reminds Cunon that a sorcerer must always be mindful of when and where magic is used, as there is no way to predict who might be harmed or how such powers could be misused. With those words, he departs for home, with the day drawing to a close. Cunon remembers his dinner date with Marika. Lady Rayshaw suggests that they use magic to fly to the restaurant. Cunon hesitates and explains that he cannot do so, as he promised Marika that the first time he ever flew using magic would be with her. After some gentle persuasion from Lady Rayshaw, he reluctantly agrees. Together, they combine their magic to lift themselves into the sky, Lady Rayshaw using wind magic and Cunon shaping water to support their flight. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, Princess Marika prepares for the evening. Dressed in a blue gown, she quietly wonders if she will look good enough for Cunon, her anticipation growing as the night approaches. The 5th episode opens with Marika waiting impatiently for Cunon to arrive and take her out on their date. Her anxiety is obvious as she paces restlessly around her room, unable to stay still for even a moment. One of her maids attempts to calm her, remarking that it is only a date. But Marika pays no attention. Her thoughts are consumed by worry, whether she looks presentable enough, whether everything will go smoothly, and she continues pacing without pause. Watching her, the maid reflects that Marika's behavior is understandable. After all, this is her first time leaving the palace to go on a date, and such nervousness is only natural. Before long, the sound of a bell echoes to the halls, followed by a servant announcement that Cunon has arrived. The moment she hears his name, Marika loses what little composure she has left and rushes out of her room toward the front gate. There, Cunon is waiting, standing with quiet elegance. He greets her warmly and remarks that the moon looks especially beautiful that night, a fitting sight for such an occasion. Though he cannot see it himself, He expresses hope that the moon's beauty is as people describe, believing that it would make the evening even more special for Marika, who can behold it with her own eyes. With practiced grace, Kyunan takes her hand and tells her that he will escort her throughout the night. His words and demeanor cause Marika's cheeks to flush, her shyness surfacing as the anticipation of the date finally turns into reality. It does not take long for them to arrive at the restaurant, where they will be dining that evening. They are led into a completely private room, reserved solely for Kyunan and Marika, while their escorts remain nearby, ready to respond should either their masters require anything, as this is their first date. Kyunan is uncertain about what he should say. Nevertheless, he makes a clear effort to be romantic. In doing so, he delivers several metaphors that sound more awkward than poetic, so convoluted that they will require extraordinary effort to decipher. Despite this, he continues earnestly, eventually shifting the conversation to recount parts of his day. Kyunan explains that the sorcerers at the palace are exceptionally kind and deeply passionate about magic. He mentions that they tested his abilities, a trial he managed to pass without difficulty. Marika listens with genuine interest, clearly enjoying his company. She even finds his clumsy attempts at romance endearing rather than off-putting. From a distance, Marika's maid overhears the exchange and privately concludes that Kyunan may be somewhat foolish, but at the very least, he is sincerely trying to make Marika happy. As the evening draws on, Kyunan reveals what becomes the highlight of the date, taking Marika's hands. He confesses that although they cannot meet frequently at present, there will come a day when they are married and able to spend every night together. He admits that he longs for that future more than anything else. His words strike Marika deeply, touching her at her core, and even her maid is impressed by the sincerity behind them. After the date ends, Marika is expected to retire early, yet sleep eludes her. Her mind repeatedly replays Kyunan's words, causing her to blush uncontrollably each time she recalls them. Sometime later, on an ordinary day, Iko asks Kyunan for help with the laundry. Kyunan comes down from his room and assists her, using his magic to make the task easier. He explains that he is in the middle of writing a report and does not have much free time. Iko points out that ever since returning from the castle where he met the sorcerers, he has done little besides shut himself away in his room. She warns that such behavior is unhealthy for a young boy and could hinder his growth. During their conversation, Kyunan reflects aloud that women seem to prefer tall men, a notion Iko readily confirms. However, she adds that she likes Kyunan regardless of his height, insisting that whether he is tall or short makes no difference to her. Kyunan nearly lets slip that he feels the same way about her, but he stops himself, reasoning that such a confession would be unfair to Marika. Hearing this, Iko remarks with a teasing tone that Kyunan truly is a ladies' man. Meanwhile, back at the palace, one of the sorcerers, Victo, goes in search of his colleague Xianli. When he enters Xianli's chamber, he finds him completely buried beneath a pile of books, fast asleep. Upon being disturbed, Xianli groggily snaps at Victo, warning him never to wake him during his designated sleeping hours. However, Victo explains that he is delivering a message from the Grandmaster. Hearing this, Xianli's irritation fades, replaced by clear surprise at the contents of the message. At the same time, Kyunan receives word from the palace informing him that his master has been chosen and that a meeting will be arranged soon. Using his fingers and a small amount of magic, he carefully reads the name spelled out in the message, Xianli. The moment the name is spoken aloud, Iko begins to blush. She knows Xianli by reputation and is well aware of his striking appearance. Flustered, she starts fretting about her makeup and outfit, convinced that she might have a chance to catch his attention. Declaring that she must prepare herself, she quickly leaves the room. Not long afterward, Xianli arrives at Kyunan's home, accompanied by Marika. The instant Kyunan senses Xianli's presence, he realizes just how powerful the sorcerer is. The density of his magic is unlike anything Kyunan has encountered before. In his mind, Kyunan compares Xianli's magical aura to honey, exceptionally dense yet pure and smooth. Without hesitation, Kyunan asks whether he may address him as Master Honey, a suggestion Xianli promptly rejects. He instructs Kyunan to call him Master Xianli, emphasizing that the title Master is not optional. Even so, Xianli makes it clear that he has not yet decided whether Kyunan is worthy of becoming his student. Over tea, Xianli begins to speak with Kyunan to assess him further. True to his nature, Kyunan gradually stops focusing on Xianli and instead spends far more time flirting with his fiancée. Xianli cuts him off sharply, reminding them that he is still seated directly in front of them. He then steers the discussion toward magic, questioning Kyunan about magic circles and compound spells. Kyunan answers confidently and accurately, steadily building Xianli's trust. When asked how many compound circles he can form, Kyunan replies that he can create 31. Xianli finds this difficult to believe, having never expected someone so early in their magical studies to achieve such a number. Deciding on a final test, Xianli conjures an enormous wall and orders Kyunan to destroy it. He declares that failure will mean Kyunan cannot become his student. As Kyunan examines a wall and becomes confident that he can break it with ease, Zeonli unexpectedly falls asleep on one of Kyunan's waterbeds, finding it incredibly soft, warm, and pleasantly scented. Rather than acting while Zeonli sleeps, Kyunan chooses to sit down and enjoy tea with Marika instead. When Zeonli finally wakes, Kyunan proceeds with the test. Instead of attacking the wall with brute force, he soaks it in bubble-infused water, treating it as if it were ordinary dirt. Applying basic scientific principles and clever reasoning rather than raw power, Kyunan dismantles the obstacle with ease. This unconventional approach deeply impresses Zeonli, who ultimately accepts Kyunan as a student. However, Zeonli then makes an insensitive remark toward Marika, stating that Kyunan's status will rise dramatically now that he is under his tutelage. He adds that unless Marika finds a way to elevate her own standing, their engagement will eventually fail, as she is merely a low-ranking princess. Kyunan immediately steps in to defend her, stating that Zeonli is precisely the type of man who drives women away through his rudeness and only regrets it later. He adds that someone like that has no right to lecture others about love. Kyunan's words strike Zeonli deeply, and although he wants to respond, he finds himself unable to deny the truth in them. In the end, he has no choice but to silently accept his defeat. The 6th episode opens with Zeonli arriving by carriage to personally tutor Kyunan in magic for the very first time. Kyunan is overwhelmed with excitement, more eager than he has ever been in his life. Upon meeting him, Zeonli immediately praises himself and reminds Kyunan of how fortunate he is to be granted the honor of becoming his student. Kyunan, however, is far too thrilled to care about such remarks. He simply expresses his gratitude and eagerly asks what they will be learning that day, enthusiastically proposing several advanced and complex magical topics to begin with. Much to Kyunan's disappointment, Zeonli has far more mundane plans for their first lesson. He reveals that he has amassed an enormous collection of handwritten memos containing everything he knows about magic, and that he needs someone to make clean copies of them. Although Kyunan was born blind, his water magic allows him to perceive well enough to read and write, making him the ideal candidate for the task. Kyunan quickly realizes how tedious this work will be, and half-jokingly asks whether Zeonli dislikes him as a student. Zeonli responds coldly that he has never felt any affection for Kyunan to begin with, adding that this training will be as harsh and demanding as possible for any sorcerer. Zeonli then orders everyone else to leave the room, insisting that Kyunan work alone. Since the text contains sensitive magical knowledge accessible only to palace sorcerers, no one else is permitted to remain nearby. Kyunan apologizes to his fiancée, Marika, for forcing her to leave as well. She accepts cheerfully, explaining that she would never interfere with something as important as sorcerer training. Once the room is empty, Zeonli instructs Kyunan to prepare a waterbed, and promptly falls asleep in the blink of an eye. Left alone, Kyunan tackles the task with quiet determination. Meanwhile, Marika begins sword training of her own. She has kept this secret from Kyunan, wanting him to focus entirely on his magic. However, she has recently begun to feel unworthy of someone as gifted as him, and hopes to close the gap by strengthening herself, determined to become a bride worthy of Kyunan. Hours later, Zeonli awakens to find Kyunan utterly exhausted and only halfway through the work. Kyunan asks why the task is even necessary, prompting Zeonli to explain the distinction between information and knowledge. He states that merely reading something is not enough to truly understand it. Only by reading and rewriting does information transform into usable knowledge, and only then can it be applied practically and become power. He reminds Kyunan that this exercise is not simply helping his master, but training him to absorb knowledge completely. This explanation reignites Kyunan's enthusiasm, and he resumes the work with renewed efficiency. By evening, however, he still fails to complete it, and Zeonli leaves, instructing him to finish by the following day. The next morning, Kyunan visits the palace to meet Zeonli, but is immediately surrounded by other sorcerers eager for his attention. Zeonli intervenes, reminding them that Kyunan is a student and forcibly pulling him away. He jokingly orders Kyunan to create a waterbed for the others, so they fall asleep in comfort and stop following them. On the way to his office, Zeonli introduces Kyunan to the concept of magical engineering, explaining that many palace devices, such as enchanted lamps, were created using it. Inside Zeonli's office, Kyunan is amazed by the vast collection of memos and excitedly asks whether he can live there. Zeonli replies that it is unnecessary, assuring him that all the knowledge of the room is freely available to him whenever he wishes. He then explains his current project, a magical engineering device capable of warming or reheating items placed inside an empty box, something that would significantly improve everyday life. The issue, however, is that many such projects require water magic for fine adjustments, while Zeonli himself specializes in earth magic. Earth magic can reinforce materials, but water magic is essential for precise manipulation. Kyunan eagerly agrees to help, seeing it as another step toward his ultimate goal of creating eyes for himself. Their discussion is interrupted by the Grandmaster, who requests Kyunan's presence. Annoyed, Zeonli orders Kyunan to put the Grandmaster to sleep with a waterbed, so they will not be disturbed. Eventually, lunchtime arrives, and the sorcerers gather for a hearty meal. Some suggest that Kyunan could change masters if he wished, but Kyunan loudly declares his absolute devotion to Zeonli and his desire to learn only from him. This embarrasses Zeonli, who tells him to stop the flattery, only encouraging Kyunan to praise him even more. During the meal, the Grandmaster introduces Kyunan to the idea of a prestigious magic academy attended by sorcerers from all over the world. The school accepts students aged 12 and above, meaning Kyunan still has 2 years to decide. Zeonli advises him to at least consider it. 2 years pass swiftly, and Kyunan grows into a remarkably capable sorcerer. During a friendly duel, he successfully counters one of Zeonli's powerful attacks with water magic, earning his master's acknowledgement. Later, Kyunan discusses his ongoing projects and theoretical research with Marika, unaware that Zeonli is listening. Zeonli interrupts, telling Kyunan that it is time to think seriously about enrolling in the academy. Kyunan refuses, insisting that remaining under Zeonli's guidance is the best path forward. Zeonli, however, disagrees. Although he has taught Kyunan well, he believes Kyunan would benefit more from training under a master who specializes in water magic. At the academy, Kyunan might find a mentor better suited to guide his growth. The unspoken truth is that Zeonli does not want to leave Marika behind. Marika herself grabs Kyunan and reassures him that everything will be fine, urging him to attend the academy and pursue greater heights. That day, Zeonli leaves, reminding Kyunan never to forget his true goal, learning to create eyes through water magic. Back at home, Kyunan reflects on what he's been neglecting. He remembers that his journey into magic began with a simple desire, to see the world for the first time. Though he has achieved so much already, he realizes that personal growth does not mean abandoning that dream. Renewed, he begins developing new theories focused entirely on restoring his sight. Meanwhile, Marika travels back to the palace with her knight, and Zeonli, weighed down by unease. She realizes how much Kyunan has achieved in just 2 years, and fears the widening gap between them. If Kyunan succeeds in seeing through magic, he will become the first person in history to do so, while she will remain an ordinary princess living in his shadow. She tearfully confesses that part of her wishes Kyunan never succeeds, then condemns herself for having such thoughts. Zeonli bluntly agrees, earning himself a sharp kick from her. Marika's knight offers a gentler perspective, explaining that everyone carries both light and darkness within them, and what matters is not being consumed by either. His words bring Marika some comfort. Elsewhere, Kyunan continues his relentless research. After countless failures, something finally works. For the first time in his life, he sees. He stares at the window in awe, mesmerized by the shapes and light before him. But the moment turns abruptly ominous when he turns around and finds a massive crab looming behind him. The 7th episode begins with Kyunan standing in his room, while the magic eyeball he made hovers above him. After repeated trial and error, he is finally able to use this eyeball to see the things around him, marking his first ever success. The crab-like monster is still standing behind him, yet it does not bother him. Perhaps, since he has never used his eyes before, he does not understand that the creature is not something anyone sees every day. Instead of worrying about the creature, he begins thinking deeply about himself. He recalls how he had promised himself before starting to learn magic that, once he gained his sight, the first person he would see would be himself. Not his father, mother, or lover, but himself. He explains that he wanted to see the person who had always been a liability to others, the one who had constantly been a hassle because of his lack of sight. Tasks that were normal and mundane for others had always been difficult for him, often requiring assistance. In the end, he finally brings himself to look at his own face with his new magic eyes. He observed himself with disappointment. He notes that he does not consider his facial features outstanding, nor particularly bad. Initially, he had thought that seeing himself for the first time might trigger a surge of emotions, perhaps hatred or happiness, but he finds that no strong feelings arise. Afterward, he looks back and asks the creature behind him what it is. He then assumes that the overgrown crab might be Iko. Although this seems like an exaggerated conclusion, it makes sense given that he is seeing things for the first time in his life. Even though he has a general idea of the shape of the Iko he created, he has never actually seen that shape with his own eyes before, making this experience entirely new to him. However, this hypothesis is immediately proven wrong when Iko suddenly barges into the room unannounced and asks how he is doing. The unexpected entrance startles Kyunan, causing him to slam into the giant crab in front of him. Upon contact, he realizes the crab is immaterial and does not respond to touch or any physical interaction at all. Kyunan then explains to Iko that he has finally succeeded and is able to see using the magic water ball for the first time in his life. He tests his eyesight by asking about details of her dress to confirm whether what he is seeing is accurate. It turns out that most of what he sees is correct. However, one thing is certain. Iko does not see any crab behind him, and she definitely does not have a horn on her head. Yet Kyunan clearly sees a horn above her head for some reason. Kyunan then heads outside to grab a breath of fresh air and see what his scenery looks like for the first time. He is standing outside in one of his gardens and is able to see a beautiful scene. In fact, It is about as beautiful as a landscape can get, considering the huge amount of nature he is looking at and the bright natural sunlight falling upon it from the sky. However, what Kyunan sees is slightly different. Instead of a bright yellow sun, he sees a dark purple sun shining over all the greenery around him, which makes him very uneasy. He thinks that this is definitely not how he had imagined the scenery would look. To make matters worse, his uneasiness grows because there is always a crab behind him. That crab, which only Kyunan can see, apparently keeps following him around. He eventually decides to head out to meet his family alongside Iko and asks her whether she can see a crab behind them. She replies by asking if he is trying to scare her with a horror story. This response only confirms the suspicion that he alone can see the crab. After reaching his family, the first members he sees are his mother and elder brother. Once again, he is seeing them for the first time, but with noticeable deviations. For example, in his vision, his elder brother has wings growing from his back, and his mother looks like an adventurer with each eye a different color. The more he uses his eyes, the more he comes to the grim realization that he is not seeing things accurately. Based on what he sees, the first compliment that comes to mind upon seeing his mother is that she looks cool. Seeing his brother makes him wonder whether they belong to a race related to fallen angels or something similar. Eventually, his father comes into the room, but Kyunan can hardly make him out, as he appears more like a hollow plasma structure than his real father. The scene then cuts to the king's palace, where one of the sorcerers visits Xianli and begins speaking with him. Xianli becomes irritated that his time is being wasted and tells the sorcerer to get straight to the point or leave his chambers. The sorcerer informs him that the Grand Master has granted him permission to go outside for a change because Kyunan has achieved something remarkable. This sparks Xianli's interest, and he finally decides to go outside. Meanwhile, Marika visits Kyunan at his home immediately after hearing that he is finally able to see using his water magic. She excitedly grabs his hands and asks him to show her how it works. Kyunan forms a water eye with his magic, showing Marika the spectacular round water ball that allows him to see despite being born blind. He tells her that he is calling it the glass eye. The next thing Marika excitedly asks is for Kyunan to look at her for the first time with his own eyes. Kyunan feels excited but also somewhat afraid. He knows he is about to see the love of his life for the first time, yet he also expects to see her with some kind of deviation, with both excitement and reluctance. He opens his eyes and is pleasantly surprised to see a girl with bright blonde hair and dazzling blue eyes. However, this beautiful view of his fiancée is somewhat spoiled by the fact that Kyunan sees a feather attached to her head. For the time being, he keeps this observation to himself. He tries his best to compliment his fiancée, but is unable to come up with anything romantic, as he is distracted by the feather he sees on her head with his newfound sight. Eventually, Dario, Marika's knight, also arrives at the scene. Kyunan notices an accessory sword hanging behind him and immediately calls it cool the moment he sees it. However, Dario lifts the other sword hanging at his waist, indicating to Kyunan that the one behind him is merely an optical illusion. After Dario's arrival, Xianli himself comes to meet Kyunan, and ironically, his grim master appears to be glowing more than anyone else to Kyunan's newfound sight. He finds himself literally unable to look directly at his master because of how much light Xianli seems to radiate toward him. Eventually, Kyunan realizes he needs to discuss this privately with his master and asks to speak with Xianli alone while trying his best not to get burned by Xianli's light rays. After hearing the whole story, Xianli cannot help but laugh at the things Kyunan reports seeing. However, Kyunan finds himself in a serious dilemma and cannot bring himself to smile. He begins to worry that all the important events of his life may be tainted by these altered visions, potentially ruining his memories. Xianli finds it remarkable that Kyunan is already thinking so far ahead about his future. Once he finishes laughing, Xianli suggests it could be one of two things. First, he explains that Kyunan might be seeing the souls of the people he looks at, meaning his sight may be extending into the spiritual world. The other possibility, he says, is magic sickness. He explains that certain places are tied strongly to magic and can have significant effects on those exposed to them. Xianli notes that he himself has visited such places, which can take quite a toll, and after experiencing magical sickness, he began seeing things that were not there, much like Kyunan seeing a giant magical crab. However, Kyunan presents another possible explanation. He points toward his magic eye and asks Xianli a rather depressing question, wondering whether the device itself might be a failure. Xianli, ever confident in his student, responds that this cannot be the case, insisting that since it was made by a student, it cannot possibly be defective. This reassurance boosts Kyunan's morale, leaving him more confident than ever that he will overcome this hurdle. Not long after, Kyunan's birthday arrives. They hold a small party that includes Marika along with all of Kyunan's family members. Kyunan receives a new staff from his father, who explains that it may be slightly big now, but that Kyunan will grow into it. From his mother, Kyunan receives a new expensive pen, which he deeply cherishes. From his brother, he receives a book highlighting all the great restaurants in the kingdom, which proves to be an excellent tool for a food enthusiast. During the party, Everyone realizes that Kyunan will soon leave for his school, which is very far away. His mother begins to cry at the thought, but Kyunan's father consoles her, explaining that no matter how far away Kyunan goes, he will always love them and will return a much stronger sorcerer. At the end of the night, Kyunan receives a gift from his beloved Marika, a cute bracelet which he cherishes the most. Marika tells him that she will wait for him there and continue improving herself, so he can focus on his own growth as well. They both promise to write to each other and to keep one another in their hearts forever. The 8th episode begins with Kyunan heading to his new magic school in a carriage. Accompanying him on the journey is none other than his maid, Iko. It has been 5 days since they started traveling, and Kyunan thinks it will take another month before they reach the great city of Dairashik, where his new magic school is located. However, their grandfather's home is nearby, and they are just about to reach it. Thankfully, he notes that they will be able to rest there and regenerate their energy. Kyunan then brings up what he considers the elephant in the room, asking whether this truly marks the end of their time together. Iko regretfully states that the decision she has made is final. She explains that she will soon leave Kyunan's side and aims to get married somewhere, adding that she has already passed the usual age of marriage. She says that if she does not leave her job for marriage now, she might abandon the idea entirely, and she does not want to live her life as a single woman. Kyunan feels saddened at the thought of not having Iko around and asks whether he will be fine on his own without her help. She reassures him that everything will be fine, reminding him that he is a powerful sorcerer after all. She then jokingly remarks that the only way he can convince her to stay would be by marrying her, to which Kyunan clearly declines, noting that he is already engaged to his lovely Marika. They eventually reach the house of Kyunan's grandfather. Outside the house, Kyunan wonders how it has already been nearly 4 years since he last visited. However, he tells Iko that he cannot remember why he came to this house in the first place 4 years ago. Iko cannot believe that he does not remember. She reminds him that years ago, he suddenly became very enthusiastic about magic, and word spread that his grandfather possessed a huge collection of books. After learning this, she recalls that Kyunan pleaded with his father and mother to bring him there, and he clearly was not going to take no for an answer. She adds that he even began dancing in front of his parents, claiming he would not stop unless he was taken to his grandfather's home. Kyunan laughs at the memory, and his grandfather eventually comes out to greet him, doing so in an extremely enthusiastic manner and appearing to be in fine health for his age. The first thing his grandfather talks about is celebrating Kyunan's acceptance into the magic school. He tells Kyunan that he is willing to buy him almost anything he wants as a present. Kyunan, however, does not seem very excited about the offer. Yet his grandfather continues suggesting options ranging from jewelry to other expensive items. Seeing his enthusiasm, Iko interrupts him and mentions that he has a special letter from Kyunan's mother. They head inside the house, where the grandfather opens a letter and discovers rather discouraging news. Apparently, Kyunan's mother does not want him spending a huge amount of money on Kyunan for getting accepted into the magic school, although the permitted amount is still well over twice Iko's salary. Even so, the grandfather cannot comprehend how such an amount could be considered small for Kyunan's achievement. He asks Kyunan whether it would be acceptable not to inform his mother about how much is actually spent on him. Kyunan, however, still does not appear particularly interested in the present he might receive. He then addresses what he considers the elephant in the room and asks whether his grandfather has selected a new maid who will replace Iko. The grandfather admits that he got carried away with excitement and gets up to bring in the new maid. The new maid introduces herself as Rinko and reveals that she is actually Iko's younger sister. She states that she is 18 years old and clarifies that she already has a fiancé, unlike Iko, who is still not engaged. This remark visibly irritates Iko. However, Rinko explains that she did not intend it as an insult and simply wanted Kyunan to know her relationship status, to make it clear that she cannot become anyone's mistress. Kyunan replies that he also has a fiancé, so he is not someone actively looking for a mistress. He tells Rinko to cherish her fiancé the same way she cherishes her 3 daily meals. Rinko finds Kyunan's unusual humor appealing, and Kyunan feels relieved that his new mate understands his odd humor just as Iko did. According to Kyunan, both sisters are quite bright and similar, which the two of them take as a compliment. The two sisters speak privately about Kyunan. Rinko expresses that she had feared Kyunan might be a very strict person since he is a sorcerer and bears a hero scar, but now that she has met him, she thinks things will work out nicely because he seems quite laid back. Iko tells her that Kyunan is literally an innocent angel. Iko then recalls a time when she was first assigned by his father to take care of him. She explains that Kyunan was once a gloomy child, but with the help of a bright influence, he gradually blossomed into a very kind and extroverted boy. She proceeds to describe Kyunan's learning habits, mentioning that he often skips meals whenever he becomes deeply focused on learning magic. She stresses that it is very important for Rinko to make sandwiches for him whenever he gets absorbed in his studies. Rinko wonders aloud whether Kyunan might be the kind of man who becomes a playboy. Iko immediately tells her never to portray Kyunan that way and insists that she must never allow any woman to get close to him, with the sole exception of Marika. Rinko promises that she will do her best, though she points out that Kyunan naturally comes across as kind and slightly flirty, which tend to attract girls to him. They eventually finish making sandwiches, and Kyunan eats them. He compliments the sandwiches, remarking that they seem to have been made with the love of two sisters. Rinko comments that such a compliment further proves her point that Kyunan is becoming a budding womanizer, a statement that visibly frustrates the usually cheerful Iko. Eventually, it becomes time for Kyunan to leave his grandfather's house, and he must bid farewell to Iko as well. From this day forward, Rinko becomes his maid for the remainder of the journey. Before leaving, Kyunan privately confesses to Iko that he had always believed being away from his close family members would be very difficult for him. However, he now realizes that he is more independent and stronger than he had previously thought. Throughout this journey, he has been separated from many of his loved ones, especially Marika, yet he has managed well. Kyunan admits that he will miss Iko, but he feels capable of attending the magic school without her. Iko promises him that after she gets married, she will live in the same city, meaning they will still be able to meet from time to time. This reassurance makes the soft-hearted Kyunan very happy. Soon afterward, he boards the carriage and heads towards school with Rinko. The person most devastated by Kyunan's departure is clearly his grandfather. Although he always knew Kyunan would eventually leave, he still follows the carriage for a while, hoping Kyunan might change his mind and stay a little longer. Nevertheless, Kyunan makes the difficult decision to continue his journey. During the trip, he asks Rinko whether she will truly be fine accompanying him for years, considering that she will not be able to see her fiancé for a long time. Rinko replies that her fiancé fully supports her decision because the job will help them finance their future business. Kyunan becomes intrigued and asks what kind of business they plan to invest in. She explains that they intend to open a restaurant. They continue their light conversation as they approach another city just before reaching Dairashik. In the city, they decide to look around and come across a bookstore that catches Kyunan's interest. The two of them enter, and Kyunan is fascinated by the sheer number of books in the store. Rinko points out that his grandfather had even more books in his library, but Kyunan remarks that his grandfather's collection did not contain many magic books, whereas the store is filled with them. They then examine a very rare magic book. Rinko advises Kyunan to buy it, but he points out that the price is far too high and that they would be broke if they bought it. Rinko is shocked. She realizes the book is so expensive that she could practically open her own restaurant with that money. Kyunan explains that magic books are one of a kind, making them all incredibly rare and costly. They even speak with a receptionist, who turns out to be a great magic enthusiast. Kyunan uses his water magic to create a cute cat for her, which she adores. The receptionist offers Kyunan a discount on one of her books, but he politely declines and leaves the store with Rinko. Afterward, they visit a clothing store, where Kyunan begins gathering sensory data by touching a scarf made of dark fox skin. The fashion assistant asks him not to, explaining that the material is very expensive. Kyunan tells him that he is collecting sensory information for his magic, and using it, he creates a dark fox in the assistant's hand. The next thing the perverted man asks is whether Kyunan can make a girl too. Rinko hears this and immediately scolds him, insisting that Kyunan is just a boy. She covers Kyunan's ears and drags him out of the shop, yelling at the man like a madwoman. The fashion assistant is left standing there, staring at the magical dark fox. As soon as Kyunan leaves the shop, three mysterious girls enter and notice the dark fox in the man's hand. One of the girls touches it, finding it strange that a dark fox will be friendly with humans, and the fox immediately explodes as it is made of water. One of the girls recognizes the complexity of the spell and admits that she is not knowledgeable in this particular branch of magic. Meanwhile, Kyunan finally arrives at his new school, but trouble soon greets him. He had originally planned to stay in the dorms, only to discover that they are all fully booked. The girls they meet at the school inform him about a real estate agent, and Kyunan eventually finds a very nice house to stay in. As Kyunan prepares to start his first day, he is unaware that a mysterious man is already aware of his arrival. The man also knows that Kyunan is a student of Xianli. The 9th episode begins with Kyunan meeting 3 of his fellow applicants at the magic school. 2 of them are boys, and 1 of them is a young girl. Kyunan, being eccentric yet very confident, makes his move and approaches the girl. He asks her whether she is the saint of the kingdom. Instead of reply with simple yes or no, she responds dismissively and defensively, saying that it would not matter even if she were. Kyunan remains unfazed by her cold reply and keeps his optimistic demeanor. She then tells him to stop his odd behavior, to which Kyunan responds that behaving this way is the best method to feel good about oneself at all times. The girl begins to think that Kyunan might be hitting on her, even though that is the farthest thing from the truth. The 2 boys stand there, shocked at how Kyunan is behaving. It does not take long for Kyunan to assess that she bears the light crest, which makes him even more fascinated. He tells her that he wishes to learn from her about magic. The girl arrogantly replies that light magic reigns supreme over all other kinds of magic, so there is nothing he could possibly learn from her. Kyunon is not fazed in the slightest after hearing this rude remark. However, the two boys standing beside them correct her, explaining that there is no hierarchy when it comes to the types of magic. The girl apologizes for her rude behavior and tells everyone that she bears no emotions whatsoever. She also carries a hero scar, and unlike Kyunon, it is not her sight that has suffered, but her emotions. She cannot feel anything at all. Because of this, she cannot tell when she is being rude or noisy. She simply speaks her mind like a computer, communicating in facts and figures rather than considering their emotional impact on the people around her. The conversation is interrupted by Professor Soft, who tells him from a distance to stop flirting, even though that is not what Kyunon is doing. The professor introduces himself and his assistant, whose name is Seifai. The first announcement he makes is that there will be no entrance exam, and that all of them have already been enrolled. The four of them cannot believe it, as they are under the impression that an exam would be held before they could become official students of the school. Soft explains that this is a secret the school keeps to itself rather than announcing publicly. Instead of conducting a harsh exam to filter students, the magic school simply accepts all sorcerers who apply. This approach makes sense, as not everyone can perform magic, so it is not as though random individuals are coming to school to learn it. However, Soft clarifies that there will be examinations as the students continue their education. He explains that there are 3 levels of teaching in the school. The first level is the basic level, where students are taught the fundamentals of magic. The second level involves teacher-assisted magic and functions much like a conventional school environment. Lastly, the third level focuses on researching a specific domain of magic. The subject can be whatever the student chooses, and this learning is conducted outside the classroom. At this level, students may choose to improve their magical skills, create new spells, or pursue any other magic-related endeavor they wish. The teacher then tells the students that it is best for all of them to introduce themselves and demonstrate a bit of magic they can perform. He explains that this will give him a clear idea of where their skill levels lie and allow him to teach them more effectively. The first person to introduce himself is Hankbeat. He bears a 2-star fire crest and can perform 7 spells. He demonstrates his fire magic by producing a powerful flame in the shape of a snake that cruises across the garden, leaving a black trail on the grass. His control is so superb that he even forms a black spiral on the ground with it. Kyunon immediately takes note of his skill and adds it to his arsenal of observations. The second person to introduce himself is Ria, who bears a 2-star wind crest. The professor becomes excited upon hearing this and informs him that he also possesses a wind crest. Ria states that he can perform 8 spells and, before casting his strongest one, tells everyone to stand back. He gathers a huge amount of wind condensed into his wand before launching a massive wind attack with destructive power. Up next is Reyes. She bears a 3-star light crest, and her strongest magic is a healing spell. Since no one is injured, she explains that she will demonstrate a different spell instead. She then unleashes a powerful beam of light that stuns everyone present. Finally, it is Kyunon's turn. He begins by stating his name and informing everyone that he can only perform 2 spells. The professor finds this ironic, as Kyunon carries a letter of recommendation from 2 very powerful sorcerers, one of whom is the famous Xianli himself. In fact, Xianli has instructed the professor to make each of Kyunon's tasks extra difficult because he believes Kyunon figures everything out too quickly. For this reason, the professor finds it hard to accept that a student who has earned such praise from Xianli can perform only 2 spells. Regardless of the number of spells Kyunon can perform, the professor decides to make the test harder for him, as requested by Xianli. The professor uses his own wind magic to create a very powerful shield around himself, and then asks Kyunon to break through it. He thinks to himself that this should, in theory, be an impossible task for someone who can perform only 2 basic spells. Kyunon, however, does not think much of the defensive wind barrier, and claims that he can break through it easily. The professor challenges him to try. Kyunon then uses his first spell, Aori, to create a large number of water balls from thin air. He uses them to generate a powerful mist around the professor, forcing him to keep his wind protection active, as the moment the shield goes down. Kyunon's magic would overwhelm him. Kyunon then announces that the battle is over, explaining that his spell consumes far less mana than the professor's, and that he can sustain it for days. In contrast, the professor is using a very powerful spell and cannot maintain the shield for long. The professor ultimately confesses his defeat and expresses surprise at Kyunon's problem-solving skills as well. They all head inside, where it is time for the newly enrolled students to attend their interviews. Everyone except Kyunon feels nervous about the process. Kyunon resumes his cheerful attitude, and the only thing on his mind is Reyes' light magic and finding a way to get her to speak with him. However, Reyes continues to give him the cold shoulder, to the point that Kyunon complains to the professor, saying that she should at least respond when he speaks to her. One by one, the students are called in for their interviews. Before Reyes takes her turn, Kyunan realizes that they will be dismissed afterward and tells her not to worry, as they can meet again once classes begin. Eventually, Kyunan is left alone with the professor, who asks him what he would have done if there had been a time limit to break through the wind barrier. Kyunan replies that he plans to merge his water with the professor's wind and gain control over it, or at least enough control to break through. The professor appears amused by this hypothesis and asks whether Kyunan truly believes such a thing is possible. Kyunan responds that his gut instinct tells him he would be able to accomplish it, even though he has never attempted it before. According to him, the greatest strength of the water attribute is its ability to blend into any kind of matter. He explains that while it may not be the strongest attribute, it is certainly one of the most useful if one knows how to play to its strengths. Finally, it is Kyunan's turn, and he walks with the professor's assistant toward the room where he will be giving his interview. She leads him into a completely dark room where nothing can be seen. Knowing that Kyunan is blind, she offers to walk beside him inside the room where he will be interviewed. Kyunan thanks her for the offer, but tells her that he will be fine. He steps into the pitch-black room, and despite using his magical eye, he is still unable to see anything. He thinks to himself that it has been a while since he has been completely blind, and begins to feel slightly uncomfortable. Despite his lack of vision, he is able to deduce that there is a starry sky above him, even though he cannot see it at all. Out of nowhere, an old lady's voice interrupts the silence and begins speaking to him. He realizes that there are 6 more figures like her surrounding him, all suddenly appearing in mysterious hooded clothing. The first thing the old lady speaks to him about is Xianli, who is Kyunan's teacher and was also a very bright student at this school. Kyunan interrupts her and tells the old lady not to come near him, explaining that he is engaged. This comes off as annoying to the old master, especially since he was flirting with Rhea's moments earlier. However, Kyunan clarifies that he was only doing so to get her to speak about light magic. The old master then informs him that he can enroll directly in the advanced class, as he wishes to research magic, and is already quite powerful. Although the old lady has more to say, Kyunan does not care and leaves abruptly and disrespectfully. He later meets up with Rinko, and they decide to call it a day. Meanwhile, the professor has no doubt in his mind that Kyunan will one day become the cerulean sorcerer. The old lady is also impressed with his creativity, as he is able to see with the help of his water magic, a feat that no one in history has ever accomplished.